So many people are so fed up with their jobs feeling pointless that they're either quitting entirely or they're quiet quitting until they can make the full exit. Most people think that if they want to feel like their job has got more meaning, they have to change what they do, learn something new, retrain, start from scratch. But in most cases, that's not actually going to fix the problem. You might find that you go through that pivot and start your new job, your new career, and end up in the same situation as before, where you feel like what you're doing doesn't have much point to it. And I want to be really specific here. I'm talking about people in professional roles, creative roles, technical or academic roles who already have skills and experience, but feel like what they're doing just doesn't quite hit the mark and there's not really much point to it all. So-called bullshit jobs. But today I'm going to tell you that there is a solution that doesn't require a full overhaul of your career to stop your job feeling like it's pointless. Because after months of looking at hundreds of roles across hundreds of organizations, one thing has become really clear. There is a whole sector of work that are looking to recruit the same type of skills that you already have from that pointless feeling job that you do now, just applied in a different context that gets rid of that apathy and lets you feel like what you're doing has real purpose. So in this video, I'm going to show you what that actually looks like. Real roles, real examples, to show you how the skills and experience that you already have now might be more relevant for a purpose-driven industry than you think, so that you can see where you might already fit without having to start from scratch. I watched this great video from Tiffany Ferg recently, who really deep dives into the idea that working a job we feel like is pointless can be so psychologically damaging and lead to feeling anxious and that sense of existential dread, and just generally spending huge chunks of our days and weeks questioning the life choices we've made. And she compiles all these videos from all across social media of people that have this really strong narrative, feeling like their jobs are utterly pointless, and they're just spending between 40 and 80 hours a week sat at a desk, not because they feel like what they're doing is actually contributing in any way. She also mentions this book, which once again I have to confess that I haven't actually read. I know I should start reading the books that I mention in these videos, but I did read this Guardian article reviewing the book, and that article really highlights that most people want to contribute to something meaningful. They want to feel like there's a point to what they're spending all day every day doing. Most people want to feel purpose. They don't want to feel lazy and like they're just faking their way through their workday. And yet there's this widespread feeling among so many workers that they just aren't finding that meaning and purpose in their jobs in the current system. But fear not, I'm going to take you through a bunch of actual examples of swaps that you can make that use the skills and experience you already have, but in an environment or a sector that will give you that feeling of drive and purpose. Whether you're a project manager or an editor or an entrepreneur or an influencer, or you work in HR, whatever your background is, there is a role for you in what I'm going to talk about today. And if you don't believe me that there really is something for everyone here, look at this example. This is literally a whole organization set up for athletes who want to have a positive social impact with their work. Running a program specifically looking for professionals with experience of growing and developing businesses and who also have an interest in high rocks competitions. I don't think it gets more niche than that. So this is actually video 3 of 4 of a mini series that I'm doing. So it might be helpful to go back to watch videos 1 and 2 just so that you understand the broader context. As a very quick recap, in the first video we questioned the myth of this binary between having a professional white-collar job or having the complete opposite, passion or socially driven alternative. We talk about the middle ground between these two options and the emerging field of jobs that makes use of those more typical professional experiences and skills while also having a really positive impact on the world. And then in video 2 we talk about future focusing yourself by looking at where the world is heading so that you can strategically position yourself for employability in this growing field. And in this third video we're going to focus on some more tangible examples of where your skill set can fit into those areas that we've been talking about in the first 2 videos. So context from those videos might be helpful, but it's not necessary, so if you just want to watch this, crack on. Let's dive in. Now there's obviously too many roles to go through them all individually, so I've grouped them together into these categories. Another reason AI is ruining everything is because I was really proud of this list, and when I showed a friend, she said it looked like ChatGPT had made it. So if you're also thinking that, it didn't, I made it. Okay, starting with the organisers. Broadly speaking, these are your project managers, administrators, EAs, operations associates, office managers, HR staff, the people who underpin making things happen. And all the equivalent job examples that I'm going to go through today are basically the exact same roles that I just listed off. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, what's the difference? If you're talking about the exact same kind of role as my current operations role, then why would I feel any different in that one compared to where I am now? Well, the key difference is in who you're working for. If you want to add a feeling of purpose while making use of your existing skills and experiences, you need to pay special attention to where you're working. working. I've noticed among the people that I career mentor that there's still this really strong perception that to have a purpose-driven, socially motivated job where you're helping people or a cause, you have to be doing direct on-the-ground work. So, for example, if you want to help animals, you have to be at an animal shelter. If you want to help the climate, you're planting trees. Or if you want to help people, you're at a soup kitchen. All those roles still exist and they're still really important. So I'm not dismissing or reducing any of that in what I'm saying today. But I do think that what a lot of people are missing is how corporatized, for want of a better word, the non-profit sector has become, or how many businesses across so many different sectors are now social enterprises that are mission driven. And those missions can be across so many different cause areas, whether you care about animals or gender equality, nuclear safety, pandemic risk, or the development of AI. There are entire social cause sectors that are looking for people with mainstream professional skills and experiences across technical, creative, academic, operational roles. So you could apply what you're doing now in a different context to ease that pointless feeling that you're not contributing to much. Or it could be that for you, adding that purpose feeling is by working in a sector related to your personal passions or interests, like, for example, a specific hobby you're really into or a religion you practice. A lot of the examples that I'm going to give today are either from larger charities and non-profits that are run in quite a corporatized way, or organizations aligned with the effective altruism movement, which I won't go into too much today. I'll do a whole separate video on that at some point. But basically, the whole premise of the EA movement is how to help the most people possible with the resources that we have available at the moment. And that's by determining the most pressing issues that are affecting the most people and figuring out solutions to those issues. Okay, that was a real tangent. So back to the organisers. Let's take a look at some of the kind of organisations hiring for these roles. So we've got examples across the whole spectrum of seniority levels, from a recruitment intern that will help support recruitment operations at an organisation called the 1 Acre Fund, which is a social enterprise that supplies smallholder farmers in East Africa with financing to reduce hunger and poverty. So that intern level position, right the way up to an operations director at the Longford Trust. We're an organisation who offer scholarships and mentorship to former prisoners for studying and employability. And depending on what kind of area of mission-driven work would interest you or make you feel like you were really making an important change, there's operations roles across so many different sectors. This senior EA role at the Institute of Law and AI, who tackle legal challenges posed by artificial intelligence, and a similar type of organisation called Secure AI, looking for an operations manager to support their work advocating for AI safety and reducing risks of severe harm from AI advances. Or if AI doesn't interest you, you're more interested in helping people directly, this pandemic fund coordinator with the UN World Health Organization, helping international public health initiatives by coordinating project implementation, doing monitoring, project reports, that kind of thing. Or a senior recruiter at GiveWell, which is another non-profit working in the global health and development space. And if you don't want to pick one particular cause area, there's operations roles like these ones at Rethink Priorities, who are a think and do tank that works across animal welfare, global health, AI, climate change, a number of different areas, who are looking for someone with project management and generalist operation skills to support across the board. Or you could go really meta inception-y and work as a recruiter for operations staff, like this job at Outcat, which is focused on finding operations support to early stage organisations working on some of the world's biggest challenges. Moving on to the creatives. So script writers, video producers, editors, designers, podcast producers, creative strategists. Here we have roles like a scriptwriter and storyteller for a YouTube channel that makes EA content. So EA is what I mentioned before. Without going into too much detail, it's basically a social movement that's trying to answer the question, how do we use our resources to help others the most? Basically figuring out what some of the biggest problems are for the world, or for the people and animals in it, and then taking actions to try and improve it. Back to the creative jobs, we've got things like editors, product designers, podcasters, producers, UX designers across all seniority levels from entry to director level across organisations that work on animal rights, AI safety, forecasting risk, global priority research, the whole shebang. There's also a couple of funding pots for, if you're a creator, that wants to pivot to talking about this kind of stuff without taking on a full-time role. So grants and funding to support you to make content covering these kind of topics. But I'll go into that more in the next video, where we talk about how to actually start making the transition to the types of roles and the sectors that I'm talking about today. And if you're thinking at this point, fine, these few examples that you're giving look good, but you're just cherry picking a few examples that are actually really few and far between. And there isn't many opportunities like this for my type of role that are for good cause organisations and pay well and offer career progression. Wrong. I've been consistently checking in on these opportunities for over a year now, and I promise you there are so many opportunities coming up all of the time. My next video is actually all about where you find these jobs and how you make yourself a competitive candidate for them. So subscribe if you're interested in seeing that. But here's a sneak peek at just one of the jobs boards and for just one of the skill areas, and look at how many live roles there are right now as I'm recording this. And that's just for communications and outreach. So speaking of communicators, let's move on to them. The people who translate the ideas. These are your copywriters and editors, your marketing and communications, journalists, advocacy and campaign roles, public relations. Now, I don't want to be repeating myself for every topic, but you can see from the screenshots here, we've got roles covering senior writers, editorial assistants, communications managers, advocacy managers, media and PR staff, chief correspondents, general communication experts across all of the cause areas that I've mentioned already. And again, I'm going to go into more things like funding and training and career switcher programs in the next video, but just a really quick example for communicators. This blog building intensive program with the Roots of Progress Institute, which is a 10-week training to launch or develop a blog focused on writing about world issues, or this tech journalism fund that supports people wanting to report on the impacts of AI with stories that are maybe resource intensive projects to make. They offer funding to support that, and they're an organisation that focuses on making a more equitable economy by promoting responsible technology. So again, a very mission-driven, purposeful avenue of work for someone who has writing skills but might currently be writing about things that they don't feel like have as much gravitas. Okay, moving on to the analysts. So these are things like your data scientists, your policy researchers, your economists, your forecasters, your monitoring and evaluation roles, your risk and impact analysts, basically the people who are essentially making sense of the complex problems and guiding decisions. Our examples here include actuarial data scientists, research analysts, program associates, business analysts. And these positions are across organisations like, for example, the PDSA, whose mission is to help people and their pets together when times are tough. The Happier Lives Institute, that helps people's well-being on a systemic level by connecting donors and policymakers, or even New Incentives, a non-profit that runs cash transfer programs for people experiencing poverty in northern Nigeria. So again, using analytical skills across heavily mission-driven work areas, across a range of causes, that I can imagine would not lack feeling like purpose if you worked in them. So next is the strategists. Strategy consultants, business advisors, leadership teams, usually the ones deciding where to focus efforts. Here we've got roles like an e-commerce director for a company developing alternative proteins to reduce animal farming. Throwback to the second video in this series, where we talk about future-proofing your career by strategically placing what sector you work in or adjacent to. We've got a business development specialist for the Nature Conservancy, which, by the way, if you're thinking these roles would be taking a huge pay cut compared to the corporate equivalent, it's true that there will be some trade-off. You're not earning the same level, but this job is still offering 130,000 US dollars a year. While it's not maybe as much as the private sector, it's also not exactly self-sacrificial, considering you're applying your skills to a really important cause area. And climate-related finance is a growing field, so let me know if you're interested in hearing more about that or if it's too niche and businessy. You've also got Chief of People and Culture at an organisation that provides emergency relief and resettlement for people who are affected by natural disasters. And you've got this Head of Leadership Development of a non-profit working to end factory farming. All very strategic, business-focused, often senior level positions for organisations that are really making important changes in the world. Next is the specialists, or the techies. So your lawyers, your scientists, your doctors, software engineers, machine learning engineers, bioengineers, so many engineers, as well as lab techs or IT roles. I know this sounds like a cop-out, but I actually think this category is too broad to cover in a short segment like this. For example, these organisations are just for socially motivated lawyers across fields like AI, animal rights, human rights, just to name a few. And that's even without touching any of the other technical specialties. So instead, I'm going to do a big map of all those different specialisms in the future and the key players in each. So let me know if that would be helpful. Changing pace slightly to the next category, which is the investigators. Your undercover investigators, journalistic investigators, your auditors, your supply chain compliance and transparency roles. Basically the people finding and exposing the harms in our systems. If you're thinking this one sounds a bit niche, fair, this is probably the most niche in the list. But they do exist. For example, this current live role here with Animal Equality, who work to end farm animal suffering. This is the only example that I've got right now, but I do personally know people who work in investigations roles. So I know that they do exist and there are employment opportunities, albeit slightly fewer than the other categories. Okay, back to much more mainstream, funders and financiers. People basically deciding where resources can go to make sure the work happens. And this covers both external money, fundraisers, grant writers, impact investors, and internal money, your accountants, your treasury roles, your financial planners and analysts. Again, lots of opportunities in this area. For example, if you have a background in finance, there is a whole organisation called FAIR, and they are a global network of investors that are driving awareness of material risk from the current way we produce food for the world, harnessing the power of capital markets to build an equitable food system, which is basically a fancy way of saying making sure that investors' money is going to food producers that aren't destroying the planet and being careless with animals. There's a lot of funding and finance types of roles for environment-focused organisations, like this portfolio manager for carbon markets, or this director of nature economy and green finance for one of the wildlife trusts, or this chief finance associate again for the Nature Conservancy, or something a bit people focused maybe, like this grants and awards manager for a non-profit that looks at pollution issues like lead and mercury poisoning in low and middle income countries. Okay, the penultimate one, stick with me. Here we have the connectors, the people who are going to bring other people on board. This is your partnership managers, your philanthropy advisors, stakeholder engagement, your community managers, your donor relations. All of these roles span things like philanthropy leads, careers advisors, growth specialists, relationship managers, community engagers, development directors, again, across a huge range of different purpose-driven causes. And finally, the last category, which is the unicorns. And I'm calling them that because they're the people who use all of the skills we've just covered in the other 9 categories. And they are, drumroll, the founders and entrepreneurs. I realised when I was filming this that I do actually want to do a whole video dedicated to entrepreneurs and founders. That will probably be in a few weeks' time, so subscribe if you're interested in seeing that. And in the meantime, if you want a practical walkthrough of where you can find the types of jobs that we talked about today, or how you can start exploring how to make this kind of transition for your own career, then stick around to keep watching the next video. Thanks and see you there!